Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, setting the record straight about climate. Journalists have passed the tipping point where they no longer make any attempt to be credible about climate. E&E News, climate change, weird winter weather stokes farmers' fears. Iowa farmers are sowing corn and soybeans faster than they once did. Iowa's growing warmer in winter and hotter in summer, according to somebody. National Geographic. This decade broke all kinds of climate records, and not in a good way. Winters are warming up faster than summers. Let's look first at this claim that Iowa is growing warmer in winter and hotter in summer. This graph shows the average summer maximum temperature at all Iowa United States Historical Climatology Network stations going back for the past 90 years. Summer maximum temperatures in Iowa have plummeted nearly 5 degrees since the 1930s, and recent years have been very cool. This next graph shows average summer mean temperature, the average of the high and low temperature every day going back the last 90 years. Once again, you can see that summer mean temperatures in Iowa have dropped sharply over the past 90 years. This graph shows the Iowa percent of days above 90 degrees Fahrenheit going back the last 90 years. Again, you can see that summers are much cooler now than they were in the 1930s. It's pretty clear that the claims made by journalists about Iowa summer temperatures were complete nonsense. Now let's look at their winter temperatures. Winter maximum temperatures in Iowa have declined over the last 90 years, and recent years have been quite cool. And it's exactly the same story with mean temperatures. This next graph shows the frequency of cold nights in Iowa over the past 90 years. It indicates the percent of nights below 0 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 18 degrees Celsius. You can see that cold winter nights in Iowa have become a little bit more common over the past 90 years. Reality is that both summers and winters are getting cooler in Iowa, the exact opposite of what the E&E News article claimed. Now let's look at the National Geographic claim. They say winters are warming up globally faster than summers. This graph from NASA shows December through February temperature trends over the past 40 years. It's very clear where the winter warming is occurring. It's occurring in the Arctic. And this winter warming trend in the Arctic is confirmed by the Danish Meteorological Institute. The blue line on this graph shows winter temperatures near the North Pole going back to the year 1960. You can see that there's been a lot of warming over the last 20 years, about 8 degrees Celsius. The red line shows summer temperatures near the North Pole, and over the past 20 years they've been consistently below normal. So winters in the Arctic are warming, and summers in the Arctic are cooling. Summer is the only time when ice can melt near the North Pole, and over the past 20 years summers have been cool near the North Pole. Here's an article from The Guardian 2 years ago about the Arctic winter warming. Arctic warming, scientists alarmed by crazy temperature rises. Record warmth in the Arctic this month could yet prove to be a freak occurrence, but experts warn the warming event is unprecedented. An alarming heat wave in the sunless winter Arctic is causing blizzards in Europe and forcing scientists to reconsider even their most pessimistic forecasts of climate change. Let's focus for a minute on this key point. The Arctic is sunless during the winter, but the greenhouse effect requires sunlight. The whole idea is that sunlight warms the surface and then the heat gets trapped inside the atmosphere. But if there's no sunlight during the winter, then it can't be the greenhouse effect which is warming the Arctic. Something else besides the greenhouse effect has to be warming up Arctic winters. National Geographic used to understand what causes warm and cold winter weather. This is the December 1977 edition of National Geographic, the year the weather went wild. National Geographic showed a huge swing in the jet stream, a big ridge over Alaska and a big trough over the eastern United States. As a result of this jet stream pattern, Alaska was warmer than Florida. It snowed in Miami during January 1977. Experts were forecasting the possibility of a new ice age. This article was in Science News. The National Academy of Sciences showed a very sharp cooling trend, and the waviness in the jet stream was blamed on global cooling. The article read, "The principal weather change likely to accompany the cooling trend is increased variability, alternating extremes of temperature and precipitation. During cooler climatic periods, The high-altitude winds are broken up into irregular cells by weaker and more plentiful pressure centers, causing formation of a meridional circulation, which is a wavy jet stream. When the jet stream is wavy like this, warm air gets brought up to the Arctic and cold air gets brought down to lower latitudes. This wavy jet stream has caused the Arctic to warm up, and it's also caused the lower latitudes to cool. The cooling of the lower latitudes in winter has caused winter northern hemisphere snow extent to increase over the last 50 years. This graph from Rutgers University Global Snow Lab shows the increase in winter snow extent. Winter snow extent is increasing because cold air is pushing further south and the freeze line is moving closer to the equator, so precipitation is falling as snow rather than as rain. The Danish Meteorological Institute graph shows that winter temperatures in the Arctic have increased by about 8 degrees Celsius, or 14 degrees Fahrenheit, which is exactly the same thing that occurred 80 years ago, September 29, 1939. Scientists have confirmed the fact that the Arctic regions around Spitsbergen are warming up at the rate of approximately 1 degree in every 2 years. Since 1910, when observations first started in those regions, the cumulative rise of winter temperature has amounted to nearly 16 degrees Fahrenheit. So warming 80 years ago in the Arctic was nearly identical to the warming we've seen over the last 20 years. What happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. Arctic temperatures affect the weather all over the northern hemisphere. This week in 1935, Britain was having a January heat wave. January 3rd, 1935. The winter heat wave continues in London with a temperature early this morning only 4 degrees below that of June. Roses are blooming in Wales, daffodils in the south of England, and spring flowers are plentiful in parts of Scotland, usually snow-covered at this time of year. Even on high hills, there's not a speck of snow. We know that it can't be the greenhouse effect which is causing the swings in Arctic winter temperature because there's no sun in the Arctic during the winter. But this graph shows what is going on to cause the cyclical Arctic winter warming. The blue line shows temperatures at the capital of Iceland going back to the year 1900. You can see that there was a large rise in temperatures to about 1940, then a sharp drop until 1979, followed by another rise in temperatures very similar to the one which occurred between 1920 and 1940. You can see from the blue line that temperatures in Iceland were at least as warm 80 years ago as they are now. Now let's look at the red line, which is the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, which is an ocean circulation pattern. You can see that temperatures in Iceland very closely match the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation. So what's controlling the temperatures in the Arctic is ocean circulation patterns, not the greenhouse effect. The 1932 Winter Olympics at Lake Placid, New York nearly had to be canceled because it was too warm and there was no snow. New York was experiencing temperatures close to 70 degrees in the middle of January 1932. And it was so warm 80 years ago that the glaciers of Greenland and Norway were facing the possibility of a catastrophic collapse. This year in Greenland is quite different. Temperatures over the past month in the center of the Greenland ice sheet have been record cold. For several days, temperatures were below minus 60 degrees Celsius. Essentially everything the press reports about climate is the exact opposite of reality. Our climate is cyclical and it's controlled by ocean circulation patterns, not carbon dioxide. We rarely hear factual information reported about climate by the press. This is bad for the world, and it's also the reason that so many people are watching my videos. They want to hear the truth about climate. We need to get the word out during this critical election year. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science and propaganda for a long time.